me, boy.
You'll hear that sound a lot. Sometimes you play a game that feels different. It has some kind of a timeless essence to it that is different from everything else around it, and regardless of the age of the graphics, there seems to be something that sets it apart even in this modern day. For me, a game that fits into that category is StarCraft, all the way back from a bygone era of 1998. It was developed by a small indie studio at that time that has also since been lost to the ages that hardly nobody knows even to this day, called Blizzard Entertainment. Prior to StarCraft becoming the best-selling game of 1998, however, it did have some really interesting beginnings. Before it looked like it does in this footage, it appeared somewhat different 2 years ago in 1996 during its alpha version. I didn't come across this until recently when I was doing research for this video, and we can see some of the basic elements that are the same, but the overall look and graphics are nearly unrecognizable. I was able to find an interview back from 2018 with one of the developers of StarCraft that was conducted as part of a 20-year celebration of the game at that time. I learned that from the beginning, they tried to take the Warcraft engine and put new artwork on it that made it look like it was in space. But that caused it to look like Warcraft, but with space art. We can see some of the similarities when we compare the screenshots side by side as you see on the screen. The developer also said that when they revealed it to the public, people didn't really have a great reaction to it. They thought it initially was a sequel to Warcraft and that people thought it was going to be an orcs in space. So that was the team's motivation to change the entire game engine they were working on and using for StarCraft. I love learning the way that all of this unfolded because at the time, Diablo was in the process of shipping out in 1997, and we learned from this developer that as more and more team members were moved to work on Diablo, they gave this person the months that they needed to work on a completely new game engine. So in the interview, this person doesn't say how anyone responded when they came back to work on the project and if they appreciated it, or people simply said, "Hey, nice job." Just in case nobody said it back then, I will definitively announce that I for sure appreciate your work on changing the game engine to make the game look the way that it does. Now that we've gone through some of the lead up to the creation of StarCraft, why don't we watch the first thing you see as you start the game, the opening cinematic.
I'm detached and moving toward the derelict spacecraft.
Damn it, Jim. Video's out again.
Well, quit picking at it.
I ain't picking at it, damn it. I'm out here with a hitch in my kitty up in here and there. Your decks. Hold on, I got visual. Get the damn smoke, you find the back. I'm behind the ship. I'm behind you, Jim.
Although we don't learn much in the way of the story, I do vividly remember as a child being in complete awe of the graphics and how everything looked together. We can also tell the scene is being set for one of conflict out in space. Something I did learn that I did not know previously is that it shows you might be blown up by extraterrestrials if you smoke cigars. So, lesson learned. If the cinematic gave me a sense of awe as a child, then this menu gave me a sense of wonder and exploration, and really in many ways it still does. Look at the creativity that went into this screen. Every time you hover over each option of single player, multiplayer, the exit as well, there's some kind of interactivity that happens with each option. It's a beautiful touch. You might notice something that was definitely not there when the game first released. That would be the version on the bottom right where the game initially released as 1.00, so there's been quite a number of patches that have come out since then. There's also the remastered version, and I didn't notice this until now, but it appears as though it's yelling at me to purchase it now because it's in all capitalized letters. But I actually prefer the original graphics because it's not only the way that I was initially introduced to the game, I enjoy both the art style and the direction of the original. Some of the new graphics have a certain kind of shine to them, and other lighting elements seem to be slightly off to me. The gritty look of the original really complements the setting, and there's no doubt the remastered version looks graphically higher quality and also detailed, so I can understand how someone would prefer that version over the original. Going to the campaign selection screen, even more style awaits us. Same as the menu, when we hover over each campaign, it highlights the character and showcases additional information. It's not necessarily relevant, but it does add to the overall atmosphere, and I really appreciate that they put that nice touch in. It's also great that on top of adding episode 1, 2, and 3, there's a message saying the Terran campaign is incomplete that leads everyone to start with that. The first title card describes in the decades since the end of something called the Guild Wars, the Terran Confederacy rules colonized space. Everything changed 4 days ago when an alien fleet destroyed a Terran colony, and we are tasked with safeguarding and helping other colonists. We also learned the year is 2499. I always thought it was great when a game or a movie had the year set so far into the future, mainly because it's in the realm of the unknown and the unfamiliar to us in this current day. I really prefer this compared to a setting that puts the time frame forward about 30 years or so, such as in something like Back to the Future 2, that released in 1989. It depicted the year 2015. It feels sort of strange watching the movie and seeing some of their predictions of technology that's still so far away for us in the future. You know, something like the floating cars, all of their hoverboards everywhere, face tattoos, all of those kinds of things. Going into that first mission, we meet a now famous character that started with humble beginnings.
Howdy, boys. I'm Jim Raynor, marshal of these parts.
Well, howdy to you too, Jim. Jim Raynor is one of the first protagonists that we're introduced to in the campaign, and there's one last note I would like to make about the difference between the original and the remastered version. It's in the way that the character Jim Raynor looks. I always thought the way that Jim looked was so relatable in the original version because he looks like a regular person. Meanwhile, in the remastered version, it seems as though they chose the most attractive model that they could find for it. And it comes off to me like the character would say something instead of, "Howdy, boys." They'd say, "Where are those colonists? I'm going to rescue them, and then I'll rescue your heart." I don't know where that came from, but nothing against attractive people. It's only that in this story, as we will see, I believe it changes the perception of Jim as a regular person that performs greater and greater actions as he feels called upon to do so to help others, to someone that the people in the remastered version that created that sat down and thought, okay, how do we create someone that might look like an attractive hero already? It changes the feel of the character, but then again, there's probably some kind of bias in me because of the original that I grew up with. As I'm showing these clips in the background, you might be able to tell already that this is an RTS or a real-time strategy game. Some staples of that genre you can definitely expect here, such as gathering resources, building units, managing a base by building structures. It's hard to believe nowadays, but strategy games were one of the most popular genres back in the 90s. I even went to ask some AI to make sure that that statement was correct and ensure that I did not say something wrong. Or wait a second, no, sorry, that's the wrong one. Let me go to this other screenshot that is the best or correct one. So see, a wonderful example of humans and AI living in harmony. Now's a good time to discuss the mechanics of the game. StarCraft has 3 races, the Terran, the Zerg, and the Protoss. Each race requires the collection of the same resources and has basic worker units to do that. There are minerals, which is your basic gold or money in other games that allows you to create those initial units and structures. Then there's Vespene gas that allows you to construct higher tech buildings and more advanced units, such as everyone's favorite Skydog. Each race is also required to build a structure to raise their population cap and create more units, except for the Zerg, they create a unit that adds additional supply cap to build more units. The highest number of units you can build is up to a supply limit of 200. This leads to many of my games having these densely collected, supply-increasing buildings right next to each other. Now, it may not be the safest thing for all of them to be so close in case of an attack, but I always enjoyed how they look so uniform and organized. Now, a healthy dose of strategy is added to the game when each unit takes up a certain number of supply. For example, it starts out as 1 for the most basic units, and it goes up from there based upon their power. While the campaign has us starting out playing as the Terrans, we should look at some of their specific mechanics first. As we can see, they are the futuristic humans of this game. They're extremely familiar to us. They have recognizable technology that isn't so far removed from us. Things like cloaking units, aircraft with lasers, even a force field that they can use with one of their units. Terrans can also repair all of their mechanical units as well as their buildings. I would consider them a faction that has a little bit of everything. They work great as a turtling faction, meaning that they can sit back and build up while they defend their base with a line of siege tanks. You don't want to run into a line of siege tanks.
Destination!
There's also the Protoss, the futuristic race of StarCraft, to the point of some of them doing things that appear to us what seems like magic. For example, one of their units called the Templar can cast Psi Storm, that is lightning created by what I believe is their mind. I'm not exactly sure. Some of the units have energy ball attacks, while every unit and building has a shield that regenerates after a certain period of time. This is the faction that arguably has the most powerful units. For example, their most basic unit is the Zealot that requires 2 supply, while all the other races begin with units that only require 1 supply. The Protoss scratch that feeling to play as a powerful race with technology that we don't fully understand. Compared to the Protoss, the Zerg are almost the opposite in a lot of ways. They are the swarm faction that thrives on creating hordes of low-costing cheap units. They're able to overwhelm the other side through sheer numbers alone. The units may not be the most powerful, but it's an awesome sight to see them overrunning enemy defenses and bases. It's not that the Zerg can't build powerful and expensive units, it's that you almost never want to have them by themselves. You want to pair those powerful units with the cheap units to make them more effective. All of this comes together to make StarCraft an incredibly balanced and diverse game. It's pretty amazing that all of these elements coalesce and were able to come together by the developers, and they made each race different yet distinct while all of them are still fun to play. The kind of balance I'm referring to doesn't necessarily flow over into multiplayer yet, as that doesn't come later until StarCraft Brood War. An interesting quirk of the game that's worth commenting on is units on low ground shooting at units on higher ground only have a roughly 53% chance to hit the target, or if we want to be exact, it's 53.125% according to the source that I found. So typically you don't want to attack up ramps if at all possible, unless you have overwhelming numbers. StarCraft is also known for some interesting pathfinding that I would consider not the most optimal, but it is to be expected with a game that came out in 1998, and really once you become aware of it, I feel like it's a minor issue and something that doesn't detract from the overall experience. It is something that can be worked around, and at least it's a level playing field because not only do you manage it, the computer manages it, and so does everyone else that plays the game as well. There are a few more faction-specific mechanics, but they could be covered and gone through over the course of the game's story. For now, we will listen to some of the music that StarCraft offers us and begin with what you hear in the menu screens and then playing as the Terrans. That music is fantastic because I get a sense of exploration and it's almost uplifting in a way to hear. Kind of like the world is full of wonder and things to discover that are out there that we don't know about. Zerg, on the other hand, sound almost ominous and foreboding. When listening to music on the Protoss side of things, I get the feeling that there's an atmosphere of being solemn or somber. And there's also the impression of doing what needs to be done while there is some kind of loss that's happening in the background. This fits the theme of their campaign, as we will see. The Protoss do, however, have one of my personal favorite tracks. I don't believe it's possible to speak about StarCraft and not mention the vast number of iconic voice lines and game sounds.
Need a light? Goliath online. Navcom locked. Acknowledged, HQ.
I'm gone. Never know what hit 'em.
My life for ire. Assad Templari. It shall be done. My path is set. Zerach. Destroy. Annihilate. Eradicate. Power overwhelming. Power overwhelming. Power overwhelming.
If it weren't for the fact that it would probably come off as excessive, I'd show every unit voice line. The sound mixing itself is also done remarkably well when it comes to the sounds of battle and the distinct voices and attacks of different units. Occasionally there might be some overlapping sounds where one cuts off another, but it is rare.
Reporting in. Coordinates received. Attack formation. Roger. Vector on me.
Before we move into the story section, I'd like to spend a few minutes discussing the official strategy guide for StarCraft. I used all of the mission maps in this guide along with the battle strategies that are described by the author while I went through the entirety of the campaign. The reason I did this is because I actually found a physical copy somewhat recently at a local thrift store near me. I hadn't gone through this guide since I was a child, and my father had bought it for himself to use with the game. I was so obsessed with this book back then because this was one of the last games I was able to play with him before he passed away. So when I found it at that thrift store, I thought it would be an amazing way to go through the game using the guide all these years later. The most time I spent as a child reading this guide was in the different unit sections. The author gives screenshots, statistics, along with descriptions of each unit and how they fit into the overall roster, along with brief strategies of how to best utilize the unit. I always enjoyed seeing these screenshots and even some of the 3D artwork that was included with these different units. That was my favorite part back then. Now I wouldn't say I have a favorite part, but the one I spent the most time with was the mission maps that are now laid out, along with the strategies, and they are incredibly helpful. There are certain objectives that are circled, enemy bases are laid out, we can see where resource patches are on the map to help us know where to expand. The strategies overall were great, and I could tell that the author, along with the developers, worked together to try to change up some of the strategies for different missions and the units that are used to make things interesting. Some sections have specific descriptions of exactly how many units to use, while others leave it more open to your own interpretation. Most of the strategies contained within worked great, and they unfolded exactly as they were meant to. However, some were much more difficult than they needed to be. For example, Mission 10 of the Terran campaign, I don't think I will forget that anytime soon. The map and the strategy show to go through the middle of the map in between two enemy bases. Now, I'm definitely not any kind of strategic mastermind, 100% not claiming to be, but when it comes to this, I am pretty sure there is some kind of general rule out there that you almost never want to move your army in between two opposing armies, so you get sandwiched between the two of them. Needless to say, that mission was one of the most difficult of the entire campaign that I went through, but I will also say the strategy was different and it was something I had never tried before, so I definitely give it props for that because they tried to change it up in that instance. It was also enjoyable to try all of the various strategies, knowing that the author had worked side by side with the original developers of StarCraft, using different combinations of units and strategies that I may not try otherwise. One suggestion I do have while I went through the book is adding a sentence or two for each strategy that shows another way to approach the mission if the primary method described isn't working. Overall, the guide really does add to the experience of going through the game, and it even touches base upon the campaign editor, which was a huge reason back then that the game became popular on the internet at that time. I never used the editor, and I don't have any idea how to do that. I've only benefited from the hard work of others. To end the strategy guide discussion, I must show the ending 2 pages of it that show Invading Soon for StarCraft expansion set summer of 1998, along with The Saga Continues for Warcraft Adventures Lord of the Clans that was never officially released. Now that we're ready for the campaign, if you prefer to avoid spoilers, go to this part. Going back to the story, we left off with having rescued some colonists along with the help of Jim Raynor. We can hear the same high quality in the voice acting that we heard in other parts of the game when we listen to the mission debriefing screens.
We've already received the distress beacon from Backwater, and we'll take care of it. You just sit tight. You'll be notified if there's anything we think you need to know.
Damn. Listen, if we wait for Confederate reinforcements, that station's dust. I'll head out there now and do what I can. You send in some militia, and we'll save those folks. Trust me.
The writing is excellent because we see some contrast between a character like General Duke that wants us to abandon the colonists to whatever fate that they might come across. Meanwhile, Raynor wants to defy that in order to do what's right. In this mission, we are formally introduced to the Zerg in the campaign. It never fails to impress me how laid back Raynor is when first coming across the Zerg creep and stating the ground looks as though it's alive, and maybe it's because he's in a vulture and that floats above the ground, but who knows. Either way, I'm impressed by your fearlessness, Raynor. We discover and take out an infested Terran command center in this mission. Duke comes on to say that we are outlaws and now under arrest for disobeying orders and must be placed in timeout to sit and think about what we've done. The Terran Confederacy, along with Duke, refuse to help while multiple stations are overrun by the Zerg. This is when we are introduced to Arcturus Mengsk. He offers to help us and the colonists from certain death. This mission is notoriously slow, where you're meant to sit back and defend with a timer. The strategy guide suggests building an army and assaulting the Zerg base directly. I do believe this improves the mission experience, and that's what I went for in this case. When the timer ends, Mengsk helps us, however, in a classic scenario of, well, by the way, now that I helped you, I would like something in return. He wants our assistance to infiltrate a Confederate science facility and capture whatever weapon plans that they have. We do get those plans, and as they are being deciphered, we're introduced to Kerrigan in the following mission, which is arguably one of the most important characters in the StarCraft universe. Kerrigan is psychic and able to read minds, considered to be something called a ghost. This is important as it will come up again later. Kerrigan helps us start a revolt against the Confederacy in order to weaken them. Afterwards, we're treated to a grand cinematic that has a direct impact on the story as it shows a Terran battlecruiser being attacked by some Zerg. I do remember as a kid almost being offended that a battlecruiser was shown losing because I always thought it was one of the most powerful units in the game. But we will see there is no need to feel offended because the first sign that something is off with Mengsk comes about at this point. We learn it was General Duke's ship that crashed, and Mengsk orders us to go in and rescue him, as a general is an opportunity that we cannot miss to have on our side. The reason I say something seems off for Mengsk is it's never a great sign when someone says that another character that is a snake is now going to be a snake on our side. Not very confidence instilling. The data disks do eventually become deciphered, and it's not weapon plans, but apparently the Zerg are drawn to psychic emanations from ghosts, and the plans were schematics for a psionic emitter that can amplify the magnitude of the psychic emanations from ghosts and reach across worlds. The Confederacy used these psi emitters to destroy the colony that we originally went in to protect in the first few missions. Mengsk then wants us to plant the psi emitter and have the Zerg called against the Confederates. Kerrigan does start to have some doubts about how ethical this entire situation is. I will make an interesting point about this map while we're on it. You can win from the very beginning because we're given a powerful spellcaster unit that can place a shield on the SCV carrying that psi emitter. This is only to showcase it's possible to win the mission. I went back and replayed it normally afterwards because that's how I typically prefer to go through it, but I thought it was interesting to showcase. Next, we are given access to the nuclear missile option that Terrans are able to use. I found the perfect way to end the mission in this way.
Nuclear launch detected. Nuclear launch detected.
First, we see the psi emitter used only on a base. This time it's used on an entire planet. He even starts using it on people that deliver his packages a day late. Truly insane. One more turning point is we learn the Protoss are now coming to destroy the Zerg that are on the planet and overrunning it. Meanwhile, Mengsk wants us to defend the Zerg now, and we learn that Kerrigan feels tied to him no matter what because he saved her from the Zerg at some point in the past. As Arcturus becomes more and more extreme in his pursuit to take down the Confederacy, Kerrigan seems to believe in him when she says the following.
Once we've dealt with the Protoss, we can do something about the Zerg. Arcturus will come around. I know he will.
This is a great story beat in that we know Kerrigan is a ghost and able to read minds. The way that I interpret this is it seems the line is being blurred between what Kerrigan knows from being able to read minds and what she believes in based upon her emotions and feeling tied to Mengsk since he did help her. It's an incredible example to me of how to write a complex character or characters that mimic what people often do in real life, where emotions come in and get in the way of what they might know is the right choice on a gut level. Going to the end, sure enough, Mengsk issues the order to leave Kerrigan behind on this planet. Shout out to anyone else that also does this, where you're supposed to lose the mission and be overwhelmed by a large enemy force, but you try and build up as much defense as possible to see if you can hold. Always enjoyed that anytime I'm given the opportunity. Mission 10 is where we see the true intentions of the character Mengsk arise, where instead of trying to build a better world, helping people from the grips of the Confederacy, doing what's right for humanity, everything takes a back seat to him wanting to be a ruler. This is the mission where we, along with Raynor, make our escape. There is then the ending cinematic for the Terran campaign. It is definitely beautiful with the color and the contrast it displays for the visuals. It also takes everything that has happened and all the atrocities committed and turns them into the favor of now Emperor Mengsk.
From this day forward, let no human make war upon any other human. Let no Terran agency conspire against this new beginning, and let no man consort with alien powers. And to all the enemies of humanity, seek not to bar our way, for we shall win through, no matter the cost.
That takes us to the Zerg campaign. We are playing the role of a Cerebrit under a powerful being called the Overmind. A Cerebrit is this right here. I don't exactly know how to describe it, I believe it speaks for itself, but that is us. So now that we definitively understand our identity, we have but one task: to watch over and protect a chrysalis. This is when we learn about some of the Zerg's unique faction mechanics and that they must build all of their structures on creep, except for the hatchery, that's their primary structure. Their worker units are also morphed into and become the buildings they create, which is probably why everything looks like it's alive and pulsing. This is a short introductory level meant to show us some of the way that the Zerg work and their mechanics. That takes us to mission 2 called Egression, which is a form of aggression that occurs when you unfollow someone on Instagram or LinkedIn. We learn 2 important things in the story at this point. One is that Cerebrits will reincarnate if killed, and 2, the Overmind has an incredibly powerful voice.
If ever your flesh should fail, that flesh shall be made anew. That is my covenant with all Cerebrits.
Looking at the mission gameplay itself, it's another one that we can win from the very beginning if we want, because we're given 6 incredibly powerful Hydralisk units. But why would I want to do that when I could extend the gameplay and take some extra time creating a royal welcoming party for the drone carrying the chrysalis to the beacon at the end of the level? Since we were put in charge of protecting the chrysalis, this is the mission we've been waiting for to learn what is actually inside of it.
Arise, my daughter. Arise, Kerrigan.
By your will, Father, I live to serve. Let all who oppose the Overmind feel the wrath of the Swarm.
In a twist that made me speechless as a kid, it is Kerrigan that is now part of the Zerg swarm and under the Overmind's control. This mission is also great outside of that because I am able to create a large number of the Mutalisk unit to fly over and overwhelm the enemy base. It's also the only mission in the Zerg campaign that we have access to infest a command center and create infested Terrans. They explode and deal a massive 500 damage, so I enjoy it while I can. After the mission concludes, there's another cinematic that plays, and it is strongly influenced by the Aliens movie for anyone that has seen that. It also contains some of the most memorable scenes for me in all of the StarCraft cinematics. This is when we are introduced to another protagonist, this time for the Protoss, called Tassadar. In this mission, after we take out the Protoss base, Kerrigan faces Tassadar in a battle of the ages in the center of the map. It is a fight so grand that I can honestly not overstate how much it will be remembered and then recorded in history as the greatest showdown to have ever occurred. Just like that, it's over. Oh, wow. So epic. But it appears it is only an illusion. We do learn that during that magnificent duel, a Zerg Cerebrit was killed and will not reincarnate. Because of the Cerebrit dying, their brood has gone renegade and is attacking all of the other Zerg. This mission was a great way to change up the pace and have a Zerg versus Zerg battle, so the enemy types that we face during this part of the campaign is different and somewhat varied. It turns out the Cerebrit was destroyed by something called a Dark Templar from the Protoss. When the Cerebrit was killed, the Zerg Overmind learned the location of the Protoss homeworld, Aiur. We must now stop the Dark Templar from causing additional damage. They are permanently cloaked Protoss units that have a powerful attack. Fun fact about this mission is that I lost within 2 minutes because I underestimated how powerful those units are and also how soon they would attack me. Once I recovered and was able to regain my honor, the Protoss homeworld invasion of Aiur is set to begin by the Zerg. We must find and gather something called a Kadarin crystal, which has the power to help the Overmind become manifested into the world of physical form. The final mission of the Zerg has some fascinating lore.
Though I have borne witness to the passing of countless millennia, the temple which you must assault is older by far. For it was constructed by my creators, the Xel'Naga, and it marks the site where the Xel'Naga first set foot upon Aiur.
Something I didn't realize when I was younger, but I now appreciate, is how well the writers did with the story. It gives a sense of depth to the world when we listen to some of that dialogue, and also a sense of mystery. This is a mission where I purposefully set out to unleash the full fury of the Swarm by using the largest army that I possibly could. It was great to see the lines of units streaming across the minimap and overwhelming the other side as I went through the entire level. At the end, we learned that both the Protoss and the Zerg were created by this ancient race called the Xel'Naga. The Protoss were the first and gifted with purity of form, while the Zerg were gifted with purity of essence. The Overmind states the two races are opposite sides of a greater whole. It wants to absorb the Protoss to create a single powerful race that it can then rule the universe with. Same as with the Terran campaign, we have an ending cinematic that concludes with the Overmind coming into physical reality. The Protoss campaign picks up immediately after the Overmind has been created. In this first mission, it's worth mentioning the mechanics of the Protoss side of things, where they can create buildings only in the sphere of influence of something called a pylon. You can see the outline of it where they're able to build structures when you click on it. It's also amazing that you can warp in a structure and then have the worker unit called a probe move away and do whatever it wants after that. During the next segment of the story, Tassadar reappears to say he connected with those Dark Templar and learned the Cerebrits control the Swarm, and those are what we must destroy. But because we don't use any Dark Templar energy when we destroy the Cerebrit, it reincarnates, and so Tassadar is now denounced as not being trustworthy. Because of that, the Protoss hierarchy now wants to hunt down Tassadar and put him in jail before he spreads the influence of the Dark Templar to other Protoss. This has some interesting parallels to real life in that I can easily see some humans trying to cling to old traditions that might say that certain people should be shunned or not listened to. Even while some kind of disaster is imminent, they wouldn't be open to hearing other perspectives. We eventually meet Tassadar after searching for him, and he's teamed up with our good friend Jem Raynor. Instead of arresting him, we now help him to escape in order to find the Dark Templar that have been trapped by the Zerg on the planet Char. When we get to that mission, there's a great extra that you might not come across here unless you destroy one of the Terran structures that are scattered on the outside edges of the map. It's on its own separate island, and after a building is destroyed, Duke of all people come into the game and say that we are violating Terran airspace. He sends a fleet after us, which is a nice reappearance of the Terrans because we haven't seen them at all in the Protoss campaign up to this point. When we make our way to the Dark Templar to rescue them, we meet yet another great character in the StarCraft story.
You have learned to channel our dark power, as well as that of your masters. And thus you alone have found completeness beyond the scope of the Kala.
The voice actor did a great job with that because it comes off as though the character has wisdom behind their words. Something important we learned is that Tassadar now knows the power of the Templar and also the Dark Templar. This will come into play later. That takes us back to the Protoss homeworld, where we end up being confronted by other Protoss that now want to stop us for speaking with the Dark Templar. This is the mission known for getting frozen by the Protoss Arbiter, a powerful spellcaster unit. They have a really fun ability that's great when it's on your side, but not so much when it's on the other side, where they put half of your units into a crystal and they sit there doing nothing. After more destruction, Tassadar eventually turns himself in because he knows it's wrong for the Protoss to be fighting each other in the face of destruction from the Zerg. It's decided if we don't free Tassadar, all will be lost, and look who's along for the journey wanting to help. It's Jim Raynor. We eventually make our way into a crazy dive towards the stasis cell that holds Tassadar. Once he's freed, there is some dialogue that shows even though this is an alien race, the writers clearly understand how some people might go about things, and the dialogue reflects this with Zeratul words of wisdom.
I will not be addressed so by one so devoid of the Kala's light. You and your vile brethren shall die with these traitors.
Are you truly so blinded by your vaunted religion that you cannot see the fall ahead of you? Your conclave believes that they are winning this war, but all they have succeeded in doing is helping the Overmind to win.
We're allowed to escape, and a plan has been devised. In order to overcome the Zerg Overmind from overtaking everything, we'll overtly cause a distraction by killing 2 Cerebrits. This is one of those missions I enjoy most in StarCraft, sitting back, building up defense while amassing a huge army and making one enormous push to take out one Cerebrit and easily move to the other to finish it off with Zeratul. For the final mission of the campaign, the path is now available for us to attack the Overmind, and Raynor wants to join and help the fight based upon the Zerg having taken everything from him. When the mission starts, the other Protoss now say, "Oops, sorry that we tried arresting and killing you multiple times, but you were right. In Taro Adun, and please forget about all of that. What's past is past, right? Anyway, good luck." Now that we have their well wishes, I must say that this is as grand a final mission as there ever was, because we control 2 separate bases and 2 separate armies, both the Protoss and Terrans. It's an epic showdown, and we know what's at stake thanks to the buildup of the story over the course of the campaign, knowing that the Overmind wants to absorb all life into it and have ultimate power. This mission exemplifies what makes this experience so great, because it takes all of the amazing parts of StarCraft and puts it into one final act. The mission is full of multiple times defending Zerg attacks while building up both bases, both armies, in order to do one final push against this Overmind. After we succeed, we learn it's only damaged, not destroyed. This is where we are treated to an incredible final cinematic. In the aftermath of Tassadar's sacrifice, the Overmind was killed, and the remainder of the story's heroes don't celebrate, but realize what was lost in the process. This is fantastic writing because it shows there is depth to the characters, and this mimics feelings that people often have in real life when something is gained at great cost. Lastly, on the final title card, we learn that Kerrigan, Queen of Blades, knew her time of ascension was at hand. Overall, there are really only minor things I would comment upon that could be improved, such as I'd prefer if some of the missions didn't require you to destroy every single building, for example. It is a smoother experience, I believe, for the player when you don't have to hunt down a building that's hidden somewhere on the map. Also, changing some of the win conditions of the levels could be good as well, since almost all of them come down to defeating the enemy base. But at the same time, the objectives fit how the story unfolds. The level designers and the writers seem to have worked so closely together that the win conditions of the maps and even the potential lack of enemy variety in some parts of the campaign end up being minor. It's hard to put into words exactly how amazing this journey was and how much I truly enjoyed going through every moment of it. The story building rivals, or in many cases even surpasses books and movies I've come across. Everything in StarCraft comes together to create such a wonderful experience. If you're at all interested in RTS games and you're able to overlook the graphics and some of the dated gameplay elements, I highly recommend going back to it. This original version is available for free on Battle.net. You can also play the remastered version on PC Game Pass. The strategy guide that I used also added even more to the journey, and if anyone would like to use that strategy guide as I did, there is a great high-quality PDF version for free on Internet Archive. It was amazing to see all the work that the author and everyone else put into not only that guide, but the same is true, of course, for the writers, the developers, the artists, everyone that came together and created StarCraft as a whole. With that, thank you to everyone that watched. I hope you enjoyed your time while you were here, and I truly appreciate all the support, so I hope you have a great rest of your day, wherever you are.